Two soldiers crouch behind a mounted machine gun in the Australian outback. Ammunition stacked and ready, orders given. This is officially a military operation. The enemy approaches, fast, low to the ground, completely unbothered by the fact that they are at this moment facing down the Australian army. This is the Australian army. They are losing to birds. Yes, this really happened. Yes, it was a real military deployment with real machine guns, real ammunition, and a real officer in command. Let's find out how a modern army lost a war to emus. After World War I, Australia, like a lot of countries, wants to do right by its returning veterans. So they roll out a soldier settlement scheme, give ex-servicemen plots of farmland, help them start a new life, put down roots after the horror of the trenches. Noble idea, terrible execution. A huge chunk of the land handed out turns out to be marginal at best. Dry, difficult to farm, barely capable of supporting the wheat crops these veterans are being told to grow. These are men who survived a world war being set up to lose a much quieter fight against bad soil. Every year during breeding season, tens of thousands of emus migrate inland from the coast. And in 1932, their migration route runs directly through the newly settled wheat belt. Emus are fast, they're large, and they are not gentle houseguests. They trample fences, tear up crops, and drink water meant for livestock. For farmers who are already barely scraping by on bad land, this is close to a final straw. So they ask the government for military assistance against emus. And remarkably, the government says yes. Command of this operation goes to Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery, a real officer given real orders to lead what is, on paper, an actual military campaign against wildlife. His resources: 2 soldiers, 2 Lewis machine guns, and roughly 10,000 rounds of ammunition. For context, that's the kind of firepower you'd allocate to a serious armed engagement, because as far as the paperwork was concerned, that's exactly what this was. Soldiers loading and checking machine guns. Treat this with the total solemnity the Army treated it with at the time, because they absolutely did not see the humor in it in November 1932. The enemy, several thousand large flightless birds mostly interested in wheat. Meredith and his men set up their position near a local dam, expecting the emus to cluster together in the open, giving them an easy, concentrated target. In theory, this should be a short, decisive engagement, overwhelming firepower against an animal with no understanding of what a machine gun is. In practice, nobody informed the emus of the plan. The first real engagement happens near the dam, where around 50 emus are spotted clustered together, exactly the concentrated target Meredith was hoping for. The guns open fire. And the emus, instead of staying put or panicking predictably, scatter instantly in every direction. Fast, erratic, and disturbingly hard to hit. Reports from the operation describe them splitting into smaller groups the moment the shooting started. Some accounts even describe emu groups posting what witnesses interpreted as lookouts, a bird standing slightly apart, watching while the rest of the group kept moving. Whether or not that's literal battlefield tactics or just how emus normally behave, it's exactly what it looked like to exhausted, frustrated soldiers running out of ammunition. The first engagement nets a handful of confirmed kills for a genuinely embarrassing amount of ammunition spent. A few days later, they try again, this time attempting to ambush a much larger group over 1,000 birds, funneling them toward the guns. And then, at the exact moment the operation needed the hardware to work, one of the machine guns jams. An entire flock, over 1,000 birds, simply runs past the gun emplacement and disappears into the scrub while soldiers scramble to clear the jam. Emus, it turns out, can run in short bursts at speeds comparable to a car in a suburban street while absorbing hits without necessarily going down immediately. Nobody involved in planning this operation seems to have accounted for that. Word of how the operation is actually going starts reaching the press, and it does not read well for the Army. Estimates on the number of birds actually killed vary wildly depending on the source. Everyone agrees the ammunition-to-kill ratio was, charitably, not good. In his official report, Meredith doesn't just admit defeat quietly. He goes out of his way to praise the emu's combat discipline, comparing their evasive tactics favorably to human troops under fire. A serving military officer on the official record complimenting a bird's tactical superiority over his own unit. The whole affair becomes a minor embarrassment, debated in Parliament, with critics questioning why military resources were deployed against wildlife in the first place. Within about a month, the operation is quietly withdrawn. No further military assistance is sent. The actual crop damage problem doesn't go away. It just gets handed back to the farmers, who eventually manage the emu population through more mundane means. Better fencing, bounty systems, and considerably less firepower. The war ends not with victory, but with the army quietly deciding this one wasn't worth the paperwork anymore. So that's the Great Emu War. A real military campaign with real machine guns and a real officer in command deployed against birds. And the birds, by most reasonable measures, won. The Australian Army has fought in 2 world wars. They have fought in Korea, in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, and the only campaign in their history where the enemy walked away with a better win-loss record was the one against the emus. So that happened. And the bad news is that's not even close to the dumbest thing humans have done with power, money, or zero adult supervision. The worst news, I've got centuries of this on every continent involving basically every kind of animal, government, and terrible idea available to humanity. So if you want front row seats to humanity repeatedly failing upward, hit subscribe. It's free, no ammunition required. Smash the like button and send this to one friend who deserves to know the Australian Army once lost to birds. See you next time.